Ephesians. Hey guys, so today we're going to be looking at the book of Ephesians. Now, Ephesians was a book written by a guy called Paul to the people in and around the city of Ephesus in about 60 AD. Now, Ephesus at this time was a leading city in Asia Minor. Now, Ephesus was a leading city at this time, known for its magic and sorcery. And so Paul is actually writing this letter to the Ephesians, encouraging them to stand strong in their faith in Jesus. And so the book of Ephesians, it falls nicely into two halves. The first half is Paul explaining the wondrous acts of God and actually his story in salvation history, reconciling us to his family through Jesus. The second half is actually Paul exhorting. The second half is what that means in practice, and Paul actually exhorts the Ephesians to obey God because of the faith that they have in him. And so Paul's summaries in this book are actually really cool. Some scholars actually describe Ephesians as the height of Pauline theology, just because it goes right to the heart of the gospel, really just describing God's salvation plan, but also what our response as Christians should be to that. And it's really great because Paul actually explains to us what living by the Spirit means and what living in this new life now looks like. He says, jeez Louise. He says, instead of speaking lies, speak truthfully to each other. Instead of thieving, be generous with your money. Instead of gossiping about each other, be encouraging. And instead of seeking revenge, seek forgiveness. And he says, instead of getting drunk, be filled with the Spirit. Just as a side note, the first thing he kind of goes on from there to say is being filled with the Spirit actually means singing songs to each other and making music. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. And maybe that's something we've forgotten in our churches today. I don't know, but I think that's pretty cool. And so with all this in mind, Paul is trying to get across the theme of unity by reminding them of what Jesus and God has done for them in chapter 1, and by reminding them of their identity in chapter 2. The theme of unity is really the underlying thought throughout the theology in Ephesians. And finally, Paul ends with a word of warning to the Ephesians, saying that their battle is not against flesh and blood and the magic and the sorcery that just seems to be so prominent in their culture, but rather it's against the powers and the principalities of darkness behind that. He also adds encouragement to say that God has given us the tools and the weapons that we need to actually defend ourselves from the enemy's flaming arrows, and that we need to put on the armor of God to combat the enemy's plans. And so for us today, these things are just as relevant. To live by the Spirit is to strive for unity, seeking forgiveness when we're offended, and to keep the bond of peace through the Spirit. This is a crucial message for us today, not just for the Ephesians. And we need to remember that although the enemy has a plan for us and is powerful, God has given us all we need as individuals and as a church body to combat the enemy and to stand strong together. As always, guys, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments below, and please remember to hit that subscribe button. Yo! I just ran down the stairs.